Talk line on Metro News. Welcome back to the Capitol at the AARP broadcast location here at the Upper Rotunda. Joined by the House Speaker, Tim Armstead, and the President of State Senate, Mitch Carmichael, with a reaction to what the governor's proposed. Tim, let me start with you in that, okay, you don't like what the governor said about tax increases and cuts. What do you do?
Well, first of all, I think we need to point out that this budget that he submitted is a spending spree. It really is. It's not a reduced budget. There was discussion about $28 million in cuts. This budget is $318 million more than the current year fiscal year budget. $318 million in additional spending.
You're going from $4.2 billion to $4.5 billion. Right. Okay,
exactly.
Go ahead.
So when we talk, we need to talk about where we go from here in that under that context, and that is we can't support that kind of increase in spending. First of all, so I think you take that as a backdrop, and then we're prepared to roll our sleeves up. We still want to work with the governor. We still want to work with his agencies, but we have got to really, truly, and you've talked about on your show, talking about right-sizing government. No one can see this budget as right-sizing government. This is growing government, expanding government, and we're going to have to take the lead now from a legislative perspective and do those cuts, and I think we're willing to do that and ready to do that.
Okay, so in what form will that take? Because a counter proposal, give me some idea.
Well, that's what we're working on. We've been talking, Senator Carmichael and I have been talking even last night with some of our members. We had a number of different proposals back on the table last year when we were dealing with a special session on the budget. Some things such as looking at refinancing our pension obligations, things like that are sort of the big ticket items. And then throughout this entire budget, we're going to need to be looking at areas that we can cut. And that's why I guess when I said disappointed, that's the biggest disappointment. We really took the governor at his word that he was going to sit down and
do you feel misled? Do you think you were misled?
I think the people of West Virginia were misled.
Do you?
Yes, I do. I don't know. Misled might be. I think that certainly what they were told throughout the campaign and what they're being told now are totally two different things. They're 180 degrees from where they were.
Senate President Mitch Carmichael, where does your body go from here?
Well, we recognize that we're not going to just say no to this spending spree. We're going to offer an alternative plan to the people of West Virginia that puts us right-sizing this government. Hoppy, you should be offended. Everybody in West Virginia should frankly be disappointed, I think is the right word, by Speaker Armstead, in that even with the governor's projections, even with these tax increases and the lack of budget cuts, it still, by his own projections, leaves West Virginia out of balance in the out years with the 6-year projections. It is no fix to state government. When we have to make these right-sized state government, we will make those tough decisions and offer an alternative plan, because this is now an economic policy. This is a spending mechanism to just spend and spend and spend, and that's not a proper economic policy for West Virginia.
Mitch, they submitted not really an alternative budget, but they said this is what budget cuts would look like, they being the administration, if you cut $450 million out of the budget. And they said cutting WVU by 45%, no subsidies for horses or dogs, $48 million there, cuts to seniors, ending promised scholarship, cuts to Marshall, cuts to all the colleges and universities. So they came up with a worst-case scenario of a pretty draconian list here of what $450 million in cuts would look like.
All right.
So you say?
I say no to that list. That list, there may be some things on that list that are applicable to cutting the budget, but that is not hard work at all. They did not put any really thoughtful effort into coming up with budget decreases that will operate this government more efficiently. Frankly, and I understand this scenario they're trying to lay out is that they say, if you don't pass,
either or.
And the scenario is if we don't pass the largest tax increase in West Virginia history, then we're going to have to cut these programs. And that's a fool's choice. That is not the method that we intend to right-size the state government.
Tim, what is your take on this worst case scenario list?
Well, I think it's what we've got last year was when anytime we were trying to work with the administration on cuts, they would go out and say, oh, if you cut any amount, this is going to be the end of the world. Instead of really sitting down with us and trying to find reasonable cuts, which we had hoped, I think Mitch and I both had great hopes that we were going to be able to really sit down and work together with this new administration and find the ways that we could make the most responsible cuts without having any drastic impact. And instead, what we've got here is I think this is just something that's sort of a PR tool to use to make it look like if we make any cuts, it's going to be the end of the world. And I just don't believe that.
Are you willing, I'll ask both of you the same question, and first you, Speaker Armstead, are you willing to, because when Governor Justice last night and also on this program said that he just couldn't bring himself to cut that deeply into the bone, into the engine of West Virginia, are you willing to accept whatever the consequences may be for doing that, Tim? For
to make the responsible cuts, yes. And I think our caucuses, because the consequences of not doing it are much more serious for the future of our state, because we cannot continue. This budget that's just been submitted is absolutely the wrong direction. It's the same direction that got us here in the first place. It's continuing to spend beyond our means, and if we don't really take responsibility and make the necessary cuts, then what's going to happen in the future is going to be much worse than what we're talking about.
Mitch, what about you? Because if you guys, the ball is in your court, if you guys come back with significant cuts, and let's just say they get through, and the governor's okay, I have no choice, then I'm going to sign it or whatever, then are you guys going to get blamed for if a senior program gets cut, or there's a trim to promise scholarship, or colleges get less money? And rather than looking at what the other option is, which is higher taxes, they're just going to blame you for cutting their programs.
Well, I look at it totally different. I think that we'll get the credit for putting West Virginia on the right path and right-sizing the state government. I think every family in West Virginia has to go through the same process as we don't have the money, Hoppy. We don't have the money to fund the government as it is currently structured. And so we have to go through the process of determining what's important for state government to fund and what is unnecessary. And so we'll do this in the most compassionate, responsible manner possible. Further, I want to bring forth an optimistic vision to say we're willing to work with this governor on that. I don't sense in him a lockdown approach to what he has proposed. I think I'm hopeful, at least, that he'll be willing to consider alternatives that are better alternatives. And he always says, if you have a better idea, bring it to us. That's what we're going to do, and we're going to put West Virginia on the path of prosperity rather than this just reaching into the pockets of our citizens to prop up state government.
Tim, you agree that you think the governor would be willing to work with you if you came back with significant cuts?
I hope so. I think so. I mean, he said so, and I have to take him at his word until he proves otherwise. I think that, but I do think that, let's just be honest, we've known what situation we're in. I know this idea that, it's much worse. It isn't much worse than what we were talking about last summer. It's what we were talking about last summer. And we've already been trying to look at the ways to responsibly cut government and put ourselves on the right course. And we were hopeful he was doing the same. Now, I don't know whether they know what those responsible cuts are and they just don't want to do them, or they really are waiting for someone to come forward with a plan. And if so, then I think we will be able to work with him. But that remains to be seen, and we're certainly willing to do that to the extent that he is.
Hoppy, this is a significant moment in West Virginia's economic future. It really is. This is a moment where we either right-size this government or we expand it and continue to grow and continue to write checks that our children can't cash. That's what's happened in previous legislatures, and it's gotten into this position. This is the moment where I was hopeful Governor Justice would do it. If not, the legislature will lead on this to right-size the state government and put us in an opportunity to move forward with a balanced budget, and we can expand the state in terms of jobs and opportunities. We will offer an alternative plan to this that does so.
Will you get that together pretty quickly? I mean, can we count on you within, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I mean, before we're into an extended session or whatever,
yes,
to have, say, here's an alternative plan that we can talk about.
Yes.
Will you have that?
Yes, absolutely.
Tim,
let me just one other comment, though. 10 days ago, maybe, the chief of staff of the governor was on your show saying that there would be a minimum of $390 million in cuts, and that did not come forth. I mean, we don't have any cuts. We've done an expansion in the budget. We can't continue to do this, and yes, we will have a plan.
Yes, absolutely. And let me just say, Hobby, I mean, if you put this in everyday perspective of what we're talking about here, if let's say you got a couple that both work and one loses their job, what do they do? What do they do? They have to cut back. They have to look at ways, and they try to do it as responsibly as possible. They don't go out and buy a new house and a new car. This budget is buying a new house and a new car in that situation. That's what this budget is. It's going out and spending more money.
Tim Armstead, the House Speaker, Mitch Carmichael, the Senate President, thank you both.
Thank you.